All right, welcome everyone to another webinar episode. My invited guest is Mr. Richard Advani, the Real Estate Network's go-to investment loan advisor. So today's topics, I'd like to share with you a specific market that we've been promoting, and I'm going to tell you why that we invited Richard to talk again. So I'm going to talk about Buffalo Niagara Falls. Okay, now let me tell you my investors about the uniqueness of Buffalo Niagara Falls. I know this market is not for everybody. I understand that. However, the reason I'm very confident with this particular market are the following reasons. Now, although Buffalo Niagara Falls is does not located right in the heart of the Midwest, if you will, but the kind of properties that are promoted in this Buffalo Niagara Falls, upstate New York, is very similar to the so-called Midwest market, where I have to believe not only my investors, a large number of out-of-state investors from throughout the country, for whatever reason, they like Midwest market now. So what does that mean is what does that mean? That means Midwest markets consist of, like, for example, Cleveland, Ohio, or or Indianapolis, Indiana, Memphis, Tennessee, uh, 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 few other places, Detroit, Michigan, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, uh, whereby properties in this area, Cincinnati, Ohio, whereby the properties are very inexpensive, if you will, and the cash flow is very high. So these markets, on a historical basis, some people claim that it's very depressed, it's blue collar, and these, but no, those are the old school of thought. Now, they're not, uh, they're not in Texas or Florida, whereby those homes are new constructions are selling for 160 to 230K, right? So it's higher price point. Yeah, Florida and Texas, higher appreciation potential, but the cash flow is lower, relatively speaking. So the people that like the Midwest market are people that perhaps you may not have that much money to invest. You have limited amount of down payment available, or some people want to maximize more cash flow. Some investors, they just want to buy high cash flow. Appreciation is sort of secondary, if you will. For whatever reason, whatever their goals are. I mean, every investors have different kind of goals. And finally, if an out-of-state investor are able to find a Midwest market whereby the prices are very low, relatively speaking, and the rent-to-value ratio is off the chart, and they can find a team, a turnkey provider that provide good service, that they have been around for a very long time, they are very legitimate, very reputable, that have a good turnkey system, good property management, and good tenant rental market, good neighborhoods, and they rehab the property very, very well. So with that said, again, I don't trust too many turnkey providers, the so-called turnkey providers in other Midwest market, because there's, to me and to many investors, there are more risk involved because of the C class neighborhood, C minus neighborhood, even dilapidated neighborhood. So you have to be careful what turnkey provider you're choosing out there. So my network, we have chosen the Buffalo Niagara Falls market because our turnkey provider has performed over the past few years for us admirably. I can say the word admirably. So the, think about it. They are selling homes for, like, single family home for like 40,000, a duplex for $55,000, and and they do such a good job. And my invited guest, Mr. Richard Advani, he's a main reason why that our investors have done well in the past few years using this turnkey provider here at the Buffalo Turnkey Company. And so thank you so much, Richard, for being available on this presentation. I know you're extremely busy. You and your team has processed so many investment loans for my network and other investment network throughout the California, throughout the country. You are the top-notch agent. That's without question. So I invited Richard to talk about even the value that Richard will provide for our investors, for any investors. If you buy a 45, 50,000, 55,000 property, turnkey rehab property in Buffalo, Niagara Falls in our market, Richard and his company are able to provide financing. You can put 20% down for a single family home residential property, 20% down financing with a low interest rate, historical low interest rate, 3.5%. Think about it. Your capitalization rate is around 11, 12%. And this is off the chart. Your cash on cash return on a 20 to 25% down payment on this low price cash flow properties is around 30% or even higher cash on cash return. And your rent to value ratio, typically 1%, is sometimes in this market, in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, is what, 1.5, sometimes even 2%. Now, the only way you can achieve this return, if you can find a lender that are willing and capable of doing the appraisal in this unique market. Many Midwest market who are promoting Midwest kind of property in their particular neighborhood, in other cities, the appraisal is very challenging because which Richard will explain to you momentarily. Because Richard are able to help our investors, sometimes over the last few years, I'm sure you remember, some of our investors are able to buy 3 or 4 properties here in Niagara Falls with financing. I mean, multiple loans closing that Richard Advani and his teams are able to do. So Richard will be able to share with you momentarily why his company, his lending company, are able to help some of our investors to buy multiple properties in Buffalo, Niagara Falls at the same time to close on multiple loans, and also and why the appraiser that were being used in the Buffalo, Niagara Falls are able to appraise those prices that allow for the lending to go through, whereas in other market you could not do it because, once again, because of Richard Advani and his great lending team, many of our investors are able to achieve returns on the investment here in Buffalo, Niagara Falls with some amazing returns, exceeded their expectation. So with that in mind, Richard, go ahead and share with the audience why, number one, you were able to get financing, why your company, number two, why your company are able and willing to do such a small loans where most lenders in the country are not willing to do this kind of small loans for investors. And number three, why you're able to do multiple loan closing for investors. And number four, why you're able to achieve the, for the most part, a proper appraisal in a market such as Buffalo, Niagara Falls to allow our investors to achieve such a high cash flow, even though the projected maintenance and upkeep, because it's an older home here in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, even we project 5 or 7% maintenance and upkeep factor, at the end of the day, the return, the numerical returns I just shared with you are still very attractive. So the 4 questions I just posed to you, Richard, it'll take you 20 minutes to a recap. That's fine. That's why you're here for. So without further ado, Mr. Richard Advani from Supreme Lending. Take it away, Richard.
So I don't know if I'm going to remember those questions in particular order, but so yeah, nice to meet everyone. Richard Advani here. I've been in the mortgage business about 15 years. I think Seawing may or may not remember, but my first investment property I ever bought was probably about 13 years ago now, and it was in Buffalo, New York. So just the market he's talking about, That's kind of how I made my foray into real estate investing when I was 20 or 21. Fast forward to today, I have 18 properties myself, so I am a active real estate investor. I am drinking the Kool-Aid, if you want to call it that. As Siwing mentioned, we are licensed, obviously, and all over the country. And, specifically when you're talking about the Buffalo market and the upstate New York market, we do have lending options for loan amounts as low as $40,000, which is absolutely incredible, obviously, to be able to buy these high cash flow properties, which even if you paid cash for, still gave you a good rate of return. But then you throw in leverage and, the return exponentially increases. You kind of get a partner in buying the property. And for the most part, that's going to result in, as Siwing mentioned, increased cash flows. In terms of why we go that low, I would say more than anything, it's just to be able to service our client database, to be able to service our investors, to make sure that we have almost every option available for them. As you know as well, Siwing, we're able to go now over 10 finance properties, non-conventional. So we're always trying to look for different ways to accommodate our real estate investors. Buffalo itself is proved to be a good market, as you mentioned, just because of the cash flow. And, when you go into the Midwest and everywhere in between, it's getting harder and harder to find cash flow for us investors. So a lot of people are moving more towards those higher cash flow markets. And as you said, with setting back a certain percentage for things that may arise with an older property, taking advantage of where these low interest rates, helps make up for a lot of that as well. Interest rates for rental properties in the mid threes to the low fours are historically low. In fact, last year, that's about where primary home loans were. So on average, you're able to buy, 20% more home for that same monthly payment you would have paid before. And, I get asked a lot of times from people when a good time is to buy a home and whether now is a good time to buy a rental because values have gone up so much. And, while we all know values have gone up dramatically in most markets, there are still some markets where they haven't gone up. The interest rate difference with how low they are really offsets a lot of that, increase in market value. And being able to lock in a 30-year fixed in that low interest rate range is such a good hedge against inflation as well. It's almost free money. As rents go up, as the cost of bread goes up, as everything else goes up, you'll be locked in on a 30-year fixed. And hopefully, of course, your rent's going to go up as well. 30-year fix, we really take for granted, I think, in this country. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. So when we deal with foreign investors, and I know, Siwing, you deal with a lot of them as well, they are blown away when they know that we have access to those 30-year fix, because once you factor in inflation, it's almost potentially free money when you factor that in. What were some of the other questions you had, Siwing, specifically?
Yeah, Richard, I know I spoke very, very fast.
You spilled them all out, and I didn't have a chance to write them
down. I want to make sure I did not forget everything, so I recap everything very, very quickly. So the other question is, in some Midwest markets, I'm not going to name what city, oftentimes those so-called turnkey provider in those markets, they set the price whereby maybe higher than what the market costs for. And then when the investor buy, not my investors, but other investors out there buy in other Midwest market, when it comes to appraisal or not, or not what it should be. So the investor wind up getting really screwed, if you will. They have to pay more because that turnkey provider, the unscrupulous turnkey provider in other markets where they artificially raise the price, thinking the investors are not savvy or are not sophisticated. They overcharge investors, out-of-state investors, because maybe you can say they scammed them a little bit.
And I'd say so I'll start with that, tackle that question. But I think for the most part, in areas that are going through gentrification, where you have people coming in, buying these older homes, renovating them, making them ready for us as investors to purchase, appraisers can be an issue. Plus, on top of that, like you said, there's some unscrupulous markets that do try to push their property prices up too high. In general, when an appraiser goes out to appraise a property, they're in the conventional loan space. Their goal is to go out and find mainly three comparable sales that they base the value on. And they're looking for properties that sold recently, that are close to the subject property and similar in overall appeal. And if there's, say, 30 or 40 sales in a given market, that appraiser is only picking 3 of those 30 or 40 sales that he thinks are best suited to represent that particular property or investors trying to buy. The problem that we run into in this industry is a different appraiser can go out and have a different opinion, since there's so many comps to pick from. And in areas that are kind of going through a gentrification process, sometimes you're going to have, 8 or 10 properties on the market that have been renovated, that have been, gutted by a company like the Kanazi family, and then sold to an investor. And then you're going to have other comparable sales that are similar to what your group would buy before they would sell it to the investor. And a lot of these appraisers will go out there and almost use those same comps that haven't been renovated. A lot of them, I don't know whether it's laziness or lack of expertise in working with those particular properties, but sometimes you'll see that they're not picking the correct comparable sales. So we generally try to work with appraisers that do have an intimate knowledge of the area, but also are still protecting the investor's interest, but also our interest as the lender as well, right? We don't want it to just appraise to appraise. We want to make sure that the property is worth that amount, and that it is a thorough and well put together appraisal, because when the investor puts down 20%, we still have that 80% loan. So we're doing just as much diligence. And in general, we don't run into the types of issues a lot of other markets and lenders run into in buying properties in this range. Because the Kanazi Group typically prices their properties very aggressively, but B, because we work with a select group of appraisers that not only, once again, have all of our best interest in mind, but are used to dealing with that type of product. It's very different appraising a property that was bought 6 months ago, that was renovated, that was made turnkey, and an investor type transaction, for an appraiser who's typically used to appraising primary home sales, in established neighborhoods in that $200,000 range. When you send someone like that out to appraise a $80,000 property that was recently renovated, with a tenant in it for an investor, a lot of times they don't quite know how to deal with those.
Very good, very, very good, precise, long answer. Let's go back to the other questions that I posed. Why you're able to successfully help some of our investors to close 3 or 4 properties in Niagara Falls with loans simultaneously or somewhat simultaneously, while you're able to do that, and many lenders are unable to accomplish this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of answers to that. One is, if our investors own a primary home, we have the ability to use projected rental income on the property that they're buying, even if it's not rented out. And so assume, once again, investors going to buy 3 or 4 properties, and then most of the time these turnkey, they are actually rented out, right? And when they are, we have the ability to take that 75% of that rental income at face value. And in these markets, 75% of the rental income most of the time is not only going to offset the mortgage payment, including taxes and insurance, it's also going to leave the client with a little positive. And the reason I mention that is the main thing that really determines how much or how many properties someone can buy, other than the 10 finance limit, of course, is their debt to income ratio. And given that we can use the rental income from the property that they're buying, since it's probably rented out, or the projected rental income even, that debt to income ratio doesn't really go up with each acquisition. It stays the same or goes down, which effectively means if we can qualify someone for one property, we can take them all the way up to that 10 limit as quick as they're comfortable moving. The other thing is, when you're processing 3, 4, 5 transactions for a client at a time, you need a certain level of processes internally, as well as a certain level organization and expertise in working with those scenarios. We do run across a lot of them, given that a lot of our clients, as you know, our mutual clients are doing 1031 exchanges. So we don't have the option and the luxury of closing them one at a time. So we are very organized in doing that. But to be frank, now that we have those systems in place, and now that we have, that someone buying 8 properties at once, for example, we've gone even higher than that, isn't scary to us. It actually is a lot more efficient use of the client's time and our time, because it's one set of documents that the client needs to provide for their income and pay stubs and everything else. And for us, it's just as easy to do those 6, 7, 8 concurrent loans as well, because we're going to use that same documentation. So we are very, very used to closing multiple concurrent transactions. It's a great way to buy real estate, especially when you're buying in this price range as well. Makes it a little more worth your time and overall investment. That being said, if you are buying one at a time, we're still here and happy to help.
Wow, very, very good answer. I'm sure many investors, not only newbies out there, but experienced investors probably are not aware you can do multiple loan closing all at one time. So that's very, very good to hear. Provide a lot of great value add for you. Now, since you mentioned earlier that now your underwriting lending guideline, as you spoke to earlier, you mentioned the minimum loan amount is 40,000. So as I calculate in my head, if the minimum loan amount is 40,000, you guys are willing to do a loan. If one were to put 20 to 25% down payment, so I would think that the purchase price of the rental property is around maybe 55, maybe $60,000. Is that in that right ballpark?
That's right. About 55, give or take, a little higher.
Yeah, there's no flexibility. $40,000 at this particular moment is the lowest loan amount to buy rental properties. Is that correct?
Correct. Fortunately, that is the lowest.
Right. And you mentioned for single family home, as I understand, I know loan rates changes all the time, but right now we're talking January 2021, no, February 2021. Wow, how time flies. So for single family home, one can do 20% down for up to at least 10 mortgages, right? With the Fannie Mae lending guide.
Yeah, we can actually go as low as 15% down. It gets a little trickier on the lower loan amounts. Anything over 60,000, we can probably do 15% down. We may be able to do 15% down on these lower loan amounts as well. A lot of it depends on where the market and pricing is for that particular day. But yes, 20% is what avoids PMI. And we can do that all the way up to 10 properties.
Yeah, the misconception that I've been hearing from time to time over the years is that, don't do less than 20% down because you have to pay the whopping PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. But when you're buying a property such a low amount, such as here in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, like $50,000 to $60,000, if you want to do 50% down payment because you want to preserve your total out-of-pocket cost and down payment, it's okay to do 15% down. Your interest rate can be slightly higher, but the PMI itself is not that much per month because once again, we're talking such a low price property. So Richard, can you give me a specific example? What is like if you buy, for example, $60,000 property, if you put 15% down payment, so what is the typical private mortgage insurance PMI monthly extra?
On a $50,000 property, $40,000 loan, probably $35 a month.
Yeah, that's no brainer. That's nothing. That's drop in a bucket. That's not going to affect the cash flow that much. So let me see what other question. So again, I believe Richard, you have physically visited our turnkey partner, Buffalo Turnkey System, like maybe 2 years ago. I know most of my investors that purchase out-of-state property, they never visited those properties, which is fine. You can visit later, whatever, you don't have to. But since, Richard, you have a boots on the ground, if you will, you have visited Buffalo, Niagara Falls, our market recently. Tell me about what is your observation of the neighborhood, of where the property is located.
Well, I spent 2 days touring with them, and it was probably 2 years ago, like you said. So it's tough trying to talk about specific locations that stood out. But what I can tell you is, once again, that first property I bought was in Buffalo. That was, 13 years ago. And what really blew me away was, and I know it's contrary to markets like high cash flow markets, but was how much everything went up. I sold my property there 3 years prior to me visiting the team 2 years ago. And that same property was more than double of what I sold it for. And, and I had done a good amount of research into the area as well. And, I saw that there were across the board values were going up, but in specific pockets, they were going up, quite a bit, especially from, of course, the sub 2008 years. But there was a lot of gentrification going on also. There's good opportunities for people to come in and obviously buy things super inexpensive. And that not only meant houses, that also meant, buying buildings and turning them into breweries or turning them into multi-use recreational areas, trampoline parks, things like that. So I saw a lot of, small businesses opening in areas and trendy type of businesses and restaurants and things like that. So areas that 7 or 8 years ago seemed a little more depressed to me, if you want to call it that. 4 years later, 5 years later, when I visited, a lot was going on. They looked completely different. So to me, of course, as an investor, that means there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and there has been a good amount of growth as well. But you can't really beat the price points and the cash flow either.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of misconception going on, and I know everybody are just right now is just concentrating their money on the trophy market, if you will, Texas and Florida, to name a few. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, but people just have this misconception, thinking a Midwest market, a older home is not worthy. But if you talk to our turnkey owner, the Kanazis, Keith Kanazi, the father, and his son Caleb Kanazi, his father and son team, they've been around. They've been in the Buffalo market for more than 30 years. They've been doing turnkey system for more than 30 years. So
they are definitely an institution there. They're not fly by night. And to give you an idea of the level of quality of work that they do and their confidence in their quality of work, when I went and met them, and as they do many of their clients, I met them at their house. And we went on the tour from there. I sat in their living room at their dining table. And to me, right away was, wow, they are not concerned about putting out, what they do, who they are, where they're from, because they're confident in what they're selling. They've been doing it for, 30, 40, 50 years. And at any given point, they are turning over 100 properties. They own over 100 properties that are on their books, that are in some level of renovation. They're extremely organized. They know every single street in every single part of Buffalo. And when we say Buffalo, we all think of cities and towns where we live. Buffalo is massive. Like Buffalo is pretty much the whole Bay Area combined in terms of different towns and cities within Buffalo. So it's very hard to coin one single area that stood out. And if you hear someone that's had an experience in Buffalo, positive or negative, know that Buffalo is massive. I mean, it is huge. So, honing in on the right part of Buffalo is important. The right type of investment to meet your expectations. And the good thing about the Kanazi Group is they have properties everywhere, in Buffalo, in Niagara, in the suburbs, everywhere in between. And they're a great, trustworthy family, at least in my opinion, from meeting them.
Oh, Richard, absolutely agree. We have many investors that purchased in our market for the past few years, and you have done all of their loans. If anybody should know, because you are up close and personal doing the loans for my investors in Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and you've been there yourself. So, by the way, you folks out there, you think I pay Richard to do this endorsement? No. Richard.
Well, I'm not even giving it an endorsement. I'm just sharing my experience with them, and it's been positive. So
Yeah, of course, as a loan agent, of course, Richard Advani, he have to be objective. He can't, but he just, you telling like it is. You telling the real truth, and there's no, because you do loans in all over the, all over the country. Each particular market. So you are not only a loan advisor. I mean, you are a real estate consultant. I mean, when you consult with a client, I'm sure. I mean, when you look, when our investors go through you for pre-loan approval, you have a systematic step of helping our investor do the loan, not just do the loan. You educate them. You understand their goals during your phone consultation. You understand, what is their motivation, their goals, and their objectives. Then you gather their financial data for loan approval. But beyond that, you help them to maneuver through this challenging process of buying out-of-state properties and using you as a lender. So you are one of my primary team member for my network, Richard, and we've done a lot of business. We'll continue to do a lot of business in all over the South and Southeast market, not just Buffalo, Niagara Falls. So I'll let you go. Before I let you go, once again, we can invite Richard back as often as necessary. Richard and his team is a very busy man. They do so many loans every single day for many investors, not just my network. Richard is one of the top 1% of all investment loan advisors in the country. So that's without saying. So any last recap before I let you go, Richard?
No, appreciate the opportunity to continue servicing your group and your clients. The only other thing I'll say is, please know I do primary homes as well, all over the country. And on your rental portfolio, if you have interest rates over 4.5, give or take, definitely worthwhile reaching out. We'll do, quick refinance analysis. We don't need to run your credit. We don't need to do this long thing. We'll send you some options in writing. We'll also analyze to see if it makes sense, and we can go from there. But I'm here to answer any questions anyone has, and I wish everyone a great 2021.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. Nice to know. Thank you. We will invite you back on a consistent basis because you have a lot of great topics to talk. And so thank you so much for your time, and have a nice day.
You too, C-Wing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.